Hey guys, and welcome back! Growing up and seeing the progression of technology, it's been amazing to see the progression of gaming. What started out for me really as the Sinclair Spectrum, the simple games Space Invaders and Pac-Man, or rather knockoffs of Space Invaders and Pac-Man, to games these days that can last hundreds of hours with feature-rich storylines. When it comes to RPG games, probably Final Fantasy VII is still the top dog. It probably is the most famous and well-known, but that is for a reason. But today I'm going to show you one of my favourite RPG games, and it's not just one of my favourite RPG games, this is one of my favourite games of all time. And it's a game that came out on the Sega Saturn. Now the Sega Saturn didn't do amazingly well in the UK from what I understand, but I love the Sega Saturn, I think it's a hugely underrated console, and this game is probably one of my favourite memories of it. So let's take a look. This is Shining the Holy Ark, and it came out in 1997. I think the first I might have heard of this game might well have been on Games Master or Bad Influence, the TV show. And I thought it looked really interesting. At the time I didn't actually have a Sega Saturn of my own, but my brother did. And I think I told him about this game, or maybe he read about it in a magazine, but for whatever reason he ended up buying it. I don't think he ended up completing the game, but I did, and I really loved this game. Like some of my other favourite games, you've got to have multiple copies of your favourites. You never know if one's going to die, and I have 3 copies of this game. I have the UK release, and I also have 2 sealed copies of the Japan release. I also imported a copy of the game guide from Japan, and I can't read any Japanese, although you can use Google Translate on it these days, and most of the information's on the internet, but I just wanted it for the artwork. There is also a full orchestral game soundtrack that I keep meaning to pick up, but it's about £100 on eBay the last time I saw it, so I'm going to have to wait until it comes down to something a bit more reasonable. There are a few different Shining games on the Sega Saturn, however not all of these got a UK release. I believe Shining Wisdom came out first, followed by Shining the Holy Ark, followed by Shining Force 3. Shining Force 3 is actually a trilogy of episodes, but in the UK we only got the first episode, which is a bit annoying, although you can get fan translations. But today's about Shining the Holy Ark. I have played this game through about 4 times already, and recently I played it through again, and this was probably about the first time in 10 years. But whilst I was playing it through, I recorded a lot of video, so I just want to show you why this game was such a great memory for me. When you load the game up, you get a full CG intro. Back when I was 16 playing this on a 28-inch CRT TV, this looked amazing, but it doesn't look too great today on a modern TV. On the Nintendo Switch these days, we're starting to get some games that came out on the Sega Saturn. It's basically just Sega Saturn emulation, so I've got my fingers crossed that they're going to re-release this game. Maybe with some upscaling and quality of life features, I think that would be awesome. But let's begin. This is going to be my 4th time playing through this game, and you kind of think, well, 4 times isn't that many times to play a game, but when each playthrough can last 30 to 50 hours, it soon adds up. This is my last save game, probably made about 10 years ago, and you can see it's 50 hours and 24 minutes. But we're going to start afresh. Now there will be some debate about this, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I play an RPG, particularly one that I know is going to last a long time, and they let you rename the characters, I tend to name the first character after myself. It's just something I've always done, and I know I'm not the only one, so I'm going to do the same again here. I guess it's just another way of making you feel a little bit more connected to the story. So the game starts out and you're basically a trio of mercenaries who've been hired by the king of Enrich to get the outlaw Rhodey, who's holed up in one of the caves. And you are a holy trinity. If you know anything about RPG games, you need a tank, you need heals and a DPS. So you've got a tank or a swordsman who's going to take all the damage, you've got DPS or damage per second, who's our sorcerer who's going to do all the damage, and you've got a healer who's going to heal our wounds. After a quick look around the caves, we find Rhodey and we start our first fight, along with that epic battle music. I always remember dying in this fight, but you can actually win as well, however the outcome is the same. After the fight, there's a cave in, as a craft breaks through the roof of the cave. After a bit of the story, we learn that all 4 characters are gravely injured. However, our characters are possessed by spirits. However, Forte, our sorcerer, is possessed by an evil spirit and leaves the group. Rhodey, however, joins the team, and through a series of events, we have to stop the revival of the 1,000-Year Kingdom. We get a few more details in a flashback or a dream, and this takes place at Godspeak, an area you'll be visiting at the end of the game. But for now, we need to get out of this mine. Outside the cave, you can get used to the grid-based movement of the game. One thing that's really important in this game is searching objects or interesting locations. A lot of the time they'll have hidden items, but what you really want are the Pixies. The Pixies are used to help you at the start of fights. Different Pixies do different things. You can use them to attack enemies that come from below, from above, left, right, or straight ahead. They basically do a little bit of damage before the fight starts, and you can use them to get extra experience points or rewards. But let's head to our first town. There's several different locations on the world map, however you can't unlock all of them until later on. One thing I really like about this game is how it keeps all the on-screen interface stuff to a minimum. Other than the Pixies, there's nothing that shows up. Well, until you press one of the buttons. But like most RPGs that have a town in them, the towns are used for getting new weapons, resting up your party, and saving your game. We need to stay at the inn to advance the story, but there's also some things if you look around. There's this kid outside the church who's lost his dog, and we will find this kid's dog later into the game, and he'll give us a reward. Also, take a look around the village, you might find something hidden. Here's another one of our Pixies. There's 5 different types of Pixies, and there's 10 of each, so there's 50 to collect in total. If you do manage to collect all 50, at the end of the game you can get the Fairy Bell. You can use this in encounters to deal damage, as well as earn you extra experience and coin. When we first come to the inn, we meet a couple of characters. There's Lisa the Paladin and Basso the Dragon Knight. They're also on the lookout for Rhodey. But as with any classic RPG, the old amnesia trope is in there as well, and Rhodey doesn't recognise his friend Doyle the Halfling. Lisa and Basso recognise Rhodey, and it looks like there's going to be a fight. However, one of the village elders turns up and calms the situation down. It's probably a good time to talk about the soundtrack in this game. This is by Motoi Sakuruba. You might recognise his name from certainly more modern RPGs, such as Tales of Vesperia or Infinite Undiscovery, but the soundtrack and the incidental music in this game is absolutely fantastic. It's probably one of my favourite game soundtracks of all time. We meet Doyle in the inn and we plan to go to Enrich. The borders are closed, but Doyle knows a way through the forest to confusion, and he wants to meet us in the graveyard. Standard stuff. We make our way into the forest of confusion, and we come across a few enemies. At the start of the game, most of your attacks are going to be physical. When you level up though, you can get some new and interesting spells. As a general rule, when you're taking on 1 or 2 enemies, it's usually better just to go hand to hand, but when you're taking on 3 or more, then it's time to bring out the magic. When you level up in the game, you never get thousands and thousands of health and magic points, but there are different types of stats. There's magic defense, breath defense, strength and things like that, all the traditional ones. And there's also a technique score. That affects your character's ability to do a special attack instead of a normal one. You might get more bonuses such as more damage or status effects that you can inflict on enemies. But let's go deeper into this forest and find Doyle. Most importantly of all though, we do find the kid's dog. It's going to be a while before we see him again though, so let's put him in our pocket and carry on. We go deeper into the forest, into the graveyard, and we meet our first boss. Most of the bosses in this game have this awesome CG intro, and there's another awesome music track when you fight the bosses in this game. I like some of the tracks in this game so much that I actually use them in other games. Games that have their music files saved as separate files that you can substitute for others. I try to put a bit of this game in it. I just love it so much. I think it's awesome. I think it's one of the best game soundtracks ever made. Onto the boss though, he's not too tricky for a first boss. We haven't got many spells at the moment, so we need to heal with herbs. He's got a few abilities, but he's not too bad. He's got the Lingering Ghost that slows you down, and you always want to attack first in this game, you never want to attack last. That way you can get your heals off, all your protection spells, get them all off up front. He's got the Freeze spell that damages you, but we've got a few spells of our own. I kept trying to use the sleep spell here that Rhodey gets, but it never seemed to work. However, keep bashing him and eventually he'll go down. Melody gains a level at the end of the fight, and she gets heal level 2. That heals a bit more, and you're going to need that if you're taking more damage. After the fight we meet up with Doyle again. This time he opens up the tomb that reveals a hidden pathway through the forest cave. And we need to go through here to get to Inrich, which is the next town along in the map. There's a few monsters in the cave, but it's not too bad. But it's probably the first time in the game you're not particularly close to a town, so it's always good to have a few healing herbs, make sure you're rested, and you have enough magic points to cast your heal spells. Rhodey's gained a few levels and increased his technique stats, so we start to see a few power attacks. Also, I gain a few levels, well done me. I think the cave's got about 3 separate floors. However, we're finally at the end and we can go to Enrich. The town of Enrich is probably where you'll spend a lot of your downtime in the game, healing up, saving games, that kind of thing. So on we go. The very first thing I'm going to do when I arrive in the town of Enrich is to go to the church. This is where you save the game. The Sega Saturn itself did have a bit of internal memory, so you could save games without having to buy a separate memory cartridge. However, it was battery-backed memory, so if you remove that battery, there's a good chance you're going to lose all your save games. Whenever I played this game, I used to get into a habit of backing it up to the internal RAM and also making a separate copy on the external memory card you can buy separately. Just so if anything ever did go wrong, you've got another copy of it. You don't want to restart your game after 30 odd hours. Upon resting and leaving the pub, we meet one of the game's bad guys. This is Elise, and although you don't fight her in the game, she is part of the story. We'll also have her allies, Rilix and Panzer to deal with in the game. And also Garm, who is a bit of a mystery. We prepare ourselves for a fight, but thankfully in this cutscene she just disappears and goes away. So we can carry on our adventure. After that strange interaction we go and see the king, and we see the king is under the power of the evil Rilix, and we also meet Forte, who we started out the game with. We learn both of these characters are possessed and we're thrown into the dungeon. Thankfully Doyle comes to our rescue and he gives us a way out through the underground passages. We meet one of the king's old advisors and he acts as the church save point and also allows us to rest up whilst we're underground. It's at this point in the game where it takes a large step up in difficulty. I think a lot of people who come to this area in the game find that first time round. And anything before this point in the game you were kind of able to play it all the way through without sort of needing to grind or anything like that. Level up your characters, gain some levels, gain some spells, otherwise this bit of the game is going to be a real pain for you. The main problem here is that although the monsters are a lot tougher, a lot of them use spells which attack multiple characters. You have a couple of characters that can heal, but they can only heal one person at a time. So it's kind of a constant battle to keep your health up. Knowing what was coming up in the game, I stopped to do a bit of level grinding here. I probably did 4 or 5 hours here, but that was probably a little bit more than I needed to. But I just wanted to put myself in good shape for the rest of the game. When your characters reach level 20, you can get them promoted. That means they get a new class type, can wear new armour and learn new spells. So we become a champion, a summoner and a master ninja. And you need to do this, you cannot complete the game without promoting your characters. But when you get your new class, you're starting over again. You effectively start over at level 1 of your new class and you need to level up. All that work levelling up has paid off. We've got a bit more survivability now, And on top of that we got some cool new spells. We're still stuck with the old single target heal spells at the moment though. We're in the enriched underground waterways at the moment, so we're under the town and under the castle, so we've got to get out of here. We need to retrieve a mansion key to continue our adventure. In this area of the game we need to find a few keys or crests, kinda like something you'd find in Resident Evil, and using the keys moves the upper walkways around. So areas in the upper section of the map that you couldn't get to before, find the correct key to move the walkway and you can move around the upper area more freely. And from there you can drop down to the lower section into areas you couldn't get to before. Even though I'd spent a lot of time levelling up my characters, this area of the game was still a bit of a pain. The enemies using spells to attack multiple party members, it's a real pain to try and keep up on with heals and potions. We do eventually get multiple target heal spells, but that's not for a while. I remember playing this game on my first playthrough all those years ago, and I'd finally solved this dungeon, and I saw this CG intro of this skeleton here, and I thought, oh no, I'm up for another boss fight, I'm not prepared at all, and I'm going to get flattened. However, we're quite safe, and the skeleton gives us the key to the mansion to continue. We can escape the waterways up through the town well and get back to the town of Enrich. But at this point we cannot go back into the castle to challenge Rilix, which is a good thing as we're far too weak. After resting up in the village and buying ourselves some much needed new armour, we can continue to the mansion, but first of all we need to get there through the forest. Again we've got some enemies that attack multiple targets at the same time, and these sort of attacks are considered breath attacks, so this is where your breath defense stat comes in handy. Melody finally becomes a level 2 summoner, and she also learns the raise magic. So finally, if someone dies mid-fight, you can resurrect them. Looking around the forest and the graveyard, we find another secret passage that takes us underground. There's a door in here that's closed and it tells us to defeat the Clockwork Knight. So I guess we should head to the mansion first. Thankfully we can use our key that we got from the skeleton in the enriched dungeon to go straight on in. There's a few puzzles in the mansion. Thankfully it's not all just trying to find keys to open doors. There is a bit of that, but at least they changed the formula a bit. Finding hidden books to put in bookshelves to open secret passages. Or this fairly easy puzzle where the solution's on the wall, where it tells you to place various items in the room. After looking around the mansion, we find an old adversary. This is Basso the Dragon Knight, who we met back in the pub, in the first town in the game. He's in no state to carry on, so finally at this point in the game, after several hours, we get a fourth group member. Now Basso can cast no magic at all, he's purely a fighter, but he's really strong. So he's probably going to be your main form of physical damage output for this point in the game. There's a few other puzzles in this area of the game, such as using the holy water to calm the evil spirits. This stops the book and other objects floating around the room. You can then collect the book and you can put it in the missing spot in the bookcase upstairs. This reveals another secret passage and gives us the Clockwork Key. With the Clockwork Key you can finally wind the clock, and this takes us to our second big boss. Thankfully at this point in the game we're so overpowered that this fight is easy. However, we're still taking no risks. Melody's learnt a new magic called Support, which increases our speed. I'm going to cast that 4 times on our team, so we always attack first. The Time Warrior boss isn't too bad. He has got this annoying spark ability that attacks all your party members all at the same time. But like all bosses, he can attack twice per round. Thankfully, he barely leaves a dent on us. It's handy to have Basso in the team. We've got one of his power attacks here. But thankfully, this boss is an absolute cakewalk at the moment. Right behind the Time Warrior boss is a switch, and it's this switch that opens the door in the catacombs we were in, and this pretty much takes us straight away to another boss fight. I think back in 1996 I remember losing to this vampire guy. I didn't think I had enough levels. He's got the bloody flash spell that deals damage to everyone. He can drain your health, which heals himself. Also his dodge or evade stats are really high, so trying to hit him with weapons is really tricky. He'll seem to dodge most of them. It's when he succeeds in mesmerising you that you lose your health, but again we were in no risk of dying in this one, we're still quite over leveled. And he seems to go down pretty fast. After the fight with the vampire, you meet up with Garl. Now from what you know in the game so far, you assume that he's going to be one of your enemies, along with Elise, Rilix and Panzer. However, he's a bit of an interesting character, this one. And I think you learn more about him in the Shining Force 3 games that followed on from this, but for whatever reason he doesn't want to see the resurrection of the Thousand Year Kingdom. He seems to be one of those guys that are you don't bother me, I won't bother you kind of things. Don't judge a book by its cover. He fully heals us, gives us all our magic points back. He tells us a bit more story. He explains to us that we need 3 treasures from the 3 shrines to stop the opening of the Holy Ark, which Panzer wants to use to become more powerful. We need to go to the South Shrine first. At the end of this section we get the Gravity Stone, which we need to defeat the next dungeon. We need to go through and around the mountains to get to the Far East Village, and we can use this as a rest stop before we start on the first shrine. But first the mountains, it's a multi-level dungeon, and in the outside areas they're covered in ice, so when you move forward one place, you're actually moving forward 2. So you've got to be really careful of the holes here. You can kind of change your position by butting up against objects that are 1 pace away rather than 2. That way you avoid falling down any holes, and you can get to the next bit of the cave. Like any self-respecting game dungeon, we've got a boss here as well, and this time it's the Head Viper. He's got some breath attacks to hit us with, but his most annoying ability is the ability to poison you. So not only do you lose health with the first initial attack, you also lose health over time as well. However, we do have a spell that cures this, and you can also pick up antidote plants that help cure yourself. With the characters that don't have the ability to heal themselves with magic, it's always a good idea to have some healing potions with you. Just in case your healer's already healing someone else in that attack round, you can still help yourself out. But if you're healing, you're not attacking, and if you're not attacking, you're not winning. After we finally get out of the cave, we arrive in the Far East Village. This gives us a bit of downtime to heal up, rest, and upgrade our characters. There's a couple of Pixies hanging around in the village, so let's go find those too. After that, we'll make a start on the South Shrine. There's some new enemies in the South Shrine, and they are noticeably a bit stronger here. I think I might spend a bit more time leveling up. This dungeon can be a bit frustrating. You find out what you need the Gravity Stone for, and that's to go through these areas here. This lets you walk on the ceiling to avoid other obstacles. However, now the map's back to front, you look at it and you can see which areas you've explored on the ceiling and which areas you've explored on foot. And depending on which way you walk through these, you're walking through on the ceiling on one way or the other. So you can use that to your advantage. But this one can be a bit of a head scratcher the first time you do it. Thankfully I just about remembered what ways I need to go. At the end of the shrine, I hope you brought your notepad, because there's an area where you might need to write a few things down. There's a bunch of jewels and they've all got different values, and you basically need to split them into 2 groups, all of the same value. But you get clues like the sapphire's worth twice what the diamond is, and the diamond's worth half of what the onyx is, things like that. So you've got to work out what each value is of each jewel and place them accordingly. That finally lets you pull the sacred sword from the stone, and you can fight the boss. To be honest, the boss itself isn't too tough. Half the challenge is actually getting here. You've got to fight your way through 2 or 3 levels of dungeon, but you've got to do that on the floor and on the ceiling as well. But you might well find yourself low on magic power or items by the time you get here. The witch has the ability to summon other enemies to the fight, so if you keep killing these, she'll just summon more. Best to focus attacks on her. She can also use freeze magic on us, but best keep those potions and heals handy. The summoned enemies can absorb our health, and she can also hit us physically. However, we are still quite over leveled, so we take next to no damage. But along with her ice attack, she also has Hell Blast magic, and that can hit every single character. When she's finally down there, you've still got to defeat all the enemies she summoned during the fight. But after that, we've got the first of our sacred treasures, the Sacred Sword. Back in the Far East village, we talk to the village elder, and we get a bit more of the story here. We get only our second appearance from the main antagonist in the game, Panzer. We get an exchange of words, but he disappears fairly quickly. The result of this is we get a new party member, Akane. She's got some great offensive magic, but she's also got some awesome healing magic. She's the first character in the game that will let us heal more than one target at once, so from now on she's invaluable. And we're going to need her to defeat Rilix. But for now, let's go back to Desire Village, the first town we visited in the game, to finish up some old quests. Yep, finally we can return the dog to the kid. We've had this dog in our pocket or backpack for probably the last 10 hours or so. You can return the dog to the kid much earlier on in the game, but it doesn't really matter. We get rewarded with another Pixie, and I think this is one that attacks enemies that are coming straight on at you. It's always worth picking these up because they always give you extra experience in fights and coin. In the next couple of dungeons, these Pixies are really going to come in handy. There's also a bit of an Easter egg in this game. If you look in this area of Desire Village, there's nothing of interest. However, after you speak to the correct person in the Far East Village, this random tree seems to appear. Let's investigate. Yeah, we find Doyle again, and this time he joins the group as an active member. But this is absolutely not required to complete the game. And I don't think I found him on my first playthrough. But I think that was a little bit pre-internet, or at least pre-internet 1996. Pre-internet as we know it, I'd say. So I didn't have a solution or anything in a magazine like that. I just know I kept finding weapons in the game that no one could equip, so I kind of knew something was up. Like Basso, he's got no magic power at all, but he can hit really hard. We're heading back into the waterways under the castle of Enrich, and we're going to take the fight to Rilix herself. Akane knows of a secret way to get there, and she can also summon a boat that can take us to a new area of the dungeon. I kinda like the idea of revisiting an old dungeon, visiting an area that you couldn't previously get to. Now like I say, I'd spent a long time leveling up before this, and knowing what's coming up I thought I'd be in good shape. However, this is the hardest area of the game, this is the hardest boss you will fight in this game, and even though I considered myself over leveled for this bit, I was going to be in trouble. This is the fight with Rilix herself. The thing that makes this fight a bit tricky is it's in two parts. In the first part you've got to take on two evil spirits, and after that you've got to take on Rilix and two evil spirits. We've got our new group member Akane, but she's really low level. All of our other characters are a much higher level and able to resist attacks, so she's not likely to last long. Both of the evil spirits have got freeze level 3, which will hit everyone in our group, and so if one casts it, the other can cast it. The first one knocked off Akane, and the second one knocked me out as well. Thankfully we've got Melody in the group who mastered that raise magic, so she can bring us back. At the end of the first stage we can use the sacred sword which we found in the South Shrine to cut the connection between the King and Forte, but now we have to face Rilix as well. Rilix has got a couple of annoying abilities. The first is to increase the physical attack of the evil spirits, and she can also cast support magic which makes their team attack first. I tried to use the sleep magic here. You can try and put the evil spirits to sleep so they miss their turn. No luck here though. I think when she physically attacks you, she also has a chance to inflict poison damage. Thankfully we avoided that, and we got a really lucky power attack by Rhodey. This gives us a nice status effect on Rilix which causes her to miss a turn. Thankfully a couple of power attacks and she's finished. Panzer comes in and teleports Rilix away. But for now we've saved Forte and the King. After the fight we get a nice cutscene with the king, the sage Sabato, and Forte the sorcerer. We've already got the sacred sword, and now we need to get the other two sacred treasures to travel to the Tower of Illusion to get the magic we need to beat the game. At the end of this cutscene we also get Forte back in the group. Remember, this is the guy we started out the game with. We probably got to cast one or two spells as Forte before he got taken over by the evil spirit. He's a sorcerer too, and in any RPG game I love playing as a sorcerer. Anything that casts magic, that's the way to go. The West Shrine is all about water themes, and the first thing we need to do is use the Shining Sword to break the seal. This is why you can't get into this dungeon earlier in the game, although I suppose you could get in here before you do the fight with relics. Maybe that would make things easier. There seems to be a lot of enemies in this area of the game that use breath attacks, so it's always good to have your breath defense up, but I would probably say this dungeon is easier than the South Shrine. You'll definitely find some good upgrades for your team in this dungeon though. There's a nice axe in here if you look carefully for Basso, along with the usual supply of extra fairies. It has got a tough boss though. When I first played this level I was wondering what these rocks were, but they're actually turtles, and you can get them to move by feeding them turtle snacks, and they'll take you to different areas of the level. And there's a few diversions you can take here. You can actually control the turtles to some degree that take you to different areas where you can get new armour, so it pays to look around. We get to the boss of this level and I definitely remember losing to him back in 1996. I think I had to go back, do some levelling up and get a few potions, but I managed to do it on the second time round. The problem here is you've got the boss itself and the two tentacles, so you've got to watch out for all three. Our super handy Japanese player's guide shows that he's got 2050 HP. If only we could read the rest, we'd know what the tactics were. There's a few different attacks here. You can attack with the tentacle arms. He's got ultrasonic waves which can hit every member of your party. There's the scorching air attack, which I think is classified as another breath attack. And also a few rounds in you'll start to throw waves at you. But we're still a high enough level to basically just burn him down. After the fight we meet with the mysterious Garm again. Is he an ally or is he a foe? What we do know is he brings Basso's partner Lisa the Paladin back to the group, and she is the last group member who will be joining us in the game. And behind Lisa is the second sacred treasure, which is the magic mirror. Only one more treasure to go. We finally have 8 members in the group. We've got 4 up front and we've got 4 in reserve. You can actually substitute your players mid-fight, although I have heard of people playing this game all the way through and not realising you can do that, which makes the game a bit harder. So we've got Basso, we've got Lisa, Forte, Melody, myself, Rhodey, Akane and Doyle. But now we need to get onto that last treasure. Onto the East Shrine then, and you need to use the sacred mirror you just picked up to break the seal to get in. There's some useful upgrades in this dungeon, however anyone who's played this game long term knows that this is the dungeon where you level up. There's normal enemies here you can kill for experience, but what you really want are these Hitari guys. If you're a fairly low level, they're fairly tough, they hit really hard and they almost always run away from you. The trick here, at least early on, is to use Rhodey's sleep spell, put them to sleep and then you can keep on attacking them. Although early on you'll find it's resisted most of the time and they'll still run away anyway. However, it's definitely worth sticking with. These enemies give you 3,333 experience points, and if you use the fairies as well, they'll give you an additional 333. They can also drop the Dragon Orb item, which really increases your breath defense, and that's useful end game. But here's what this amount of experience points looks like at this point in the game. As you can see, it's pretty easy to level up this way, so if you're ever lacking a few levels near the end of the game, this is the place to come. I think realistically you can complete the game at a promoted level 20, 22, something like that. And I don't remember it being too hard, but in one of my playthroughs of this game I leveled up all the way. I leveled right up to 99, and that took hours upon hours. I just wanted to see how high you could go. I'm not planning on going quite that high in this playthrough though. But all of our characters are going to gain some levels now, and we're also going to gain some new spells. So this one's quite a cool dungeon. It's all about getting to the top. You've got to defeat these plants, which you can turn into ladders to go up to the next floor. We've got some new elemental magic for our summoner, and Lisa gets a nice silence spell that stops enemies casting spells. You've got to read the various stone tablets that you'll find throughout this dungeon, and they tell you what item that they want placed in them. When you collect these from the chests and put them in the tablets, it turns on some water upstairs. If you drink the water upstairs, it heals all your health points. When you finally get all the correct objects in the stone tablets, you can finally pick up the crystal jug. You can fill this up with the water of life, and you can take this right to the top of the dungeon to pour on this plant, which gives us this dungeon's boss fight. With this boss you've got the main boss itself and also 4 smaller ones to take care of. So any spells you have that affect multiple targets, that's the way to go. I tried to use Forte's silence spell to stop the enemy casting, but it didn't work. The boss here doesn't have a huge amount of spells, but it does keep poisoning you, so you've got to keep using the antidote spell or use the antidote flowers you pick up. Forte gains a new spell called Soul Steal. This can one-hit some enemies, but it's pretty tricky to get it to land. Forte's got some great spells for handling multiple enemies at the same time, and we've also got Freeze level 4 now. Melody's antidote spell comes in handy here. You're going to keep getting poisoned, so it's important to keep on top of it, otherwise your health's going to keep on ticking down. We get a nice surprise from Forte's Spark spell. When you level up you have a rare chance of doing a summon from the spell, and this hits a bit harder, but it's pretty rare to see it. Finally, Rhodey ends the fight and we can pick up our last sacred treasure. This is the pendant. Whilst making this, I did find something that made me laugh. If you open up the Sega Saturn CD on a PC, you'll find this file called Moranis. This is the video intro to the boss we've just fought, and it's gotta be a reference to Rick Moranis from Little Shop of Horrors, doesn't it? It's gotta be. Nice little Easter egg there, I thought. Now we've got all 3 of the treasures, we can finally go back to see the king. The king tells us that the 3 treasures can be used in a room in the castle to travel to the Castle of Illusion. That's almost the last dungeon in the game, and we need to go there to get the magic to defeat our bad guys. There's a little room off to the side of the throne room that contains this painting, which handily enough has 3 recesses for the 3 treasures we've picked up. When we arrive we can see the Tower of Illusion, however nearby there's another town, and this is the last town we'll be visiting in the game, so this is going to be a good chance to upgrade our weapons, upgrade our armour, and prepare for the tower. First of all we find yet another fairy on the nearby windmill. After this we get a chance to meet up with some of the locals, save our game and upgrade our armour. It seems we're expected, and this local tells us we should meet with the High Priest at the top of the Mirage Tower. The next problem we've got is Mirage Tower is actually a mirage, so you have to work out the puzzle to get it to appear. On the ground outside there's a number of tablets that tell you how to get in. You've got to walk a set pattern between the tablets whilst facing certain directions. If you get it right you can finally go on in. I like how small Mirage Tower looks from outside. It's basically Doctor Who's TARDIS there, who go inside and it's much bigger. I think the Tower of Illusion is the most complex dungeon in the game. I think this one is 6 or 7 floors high. The main trick on the first floor is using the switches. This changes the direction of some of the floors so you can walk one way or another. But first of all, we've got some enemies to fight. We've got a few wall monsters that block our way, but on the first floor we need to pick up a fragment of a moon carving. We use this on the top floor to complete the carving, which causes the roof to drop. On the top floor we find a piece of another carving, this time for the sun. The sun carving's right down on the bottom floor, so back down we go. When you finally complete the sun carving, it drops some of the water in some of the higher levels of the dungeon. This lets you get to new areas that you couldn't previously get to. We get some tough enemies here, however we've spent quite a lot of time levelling up, so we're not really in any trouble. As we've gained the levels, we start to see some better power attacks as well. This is where things start to get a little bit confusing. In the area where we drained the water, there's another anti-gravity tunnel. So just like the South Shrine, we're now walking on the ceiling. And there's a hole in this ceiling, so basically we're falling upwards through 7 floors, right up to the top floor. And here we've got the last of our standard bosses in the game. Thankfully it's only a single target fight this time, but it can still be a little bit rough, so I'm going to buff some of our characters up with some of their spells. Forte's spell increases our magic defense, whilst Rhodey's increases our attack ability. This time the boss has the ability to cast silence on us to stop us casting. Thankfully it didn't land. However, like most bosses, he's got the ability to attack twice, and he hits us with the slash laser as well. Thankfully we're fairly protected. I couldn't remember offhand if this boss uses breath attacks, but Lisa gets a nice spell barrier that protects against this, so I'm going to cast it anyway. The boss gets support magic to increase speed, but remember we can cast it as well. We get to use some of our multiple target heal spells. These are really useful, especially if all your characters are getting damaged at the same time. I think it does get a little bit too overpowered though. You can basically fully heal your characters each turn. I think they should have put a limit on it, to be honest. It does kind of trivialise things a little bit. We're really well protected though, we get hit for 1 point of damage here. Melody, our summoner, finally ends the fight and we can finally go to the top of the tower. At the top of the tower we finally meet the High Priest, and there's a really nice piano-based music theme that plays here. I think when I first played this game I think I just hung around to listen to it, it's really nice. I seem to remember I taught myself how to play this on the actual piano. Maybe not quite to the same standard though. The High Priest carries out the evolution ceremony, which is what gives us these awesome magic powers. We get a really nice destructive spell called Inferno, we get a negate spell that can cancel enemy spells, and we also get a nice heal over time spell. When this is all over we get directed back to Desire Mine. That's where the game began, and we need to finally fight Panzer to stop him opening the Holy Ark. Before we do that though, let's go and see our old friend the Experience Monster, just to make sure we've got all of our power attacks and we're leveled up nicely. Once again I ended up levelling up our team to the mid-70s. This is way above what you need to be able to complete the game, but it just makes the end a little bit easier. Like I mentioned earlier, you can level up your characters to level 99, but after that they don't gain any more experience, so 99's as high as you go. But you stop gaining spells at around level 18 or 20 or something like that anyway, so any gains after that are really just to increase your attack and defense. But we spent enough time here, let's go finish this game. Back at the mine we find another passage has opened up, and this appears to be blocked just like one of the seals we saw at the south, east and west shrine. Thankfully with our new Inferno magic we can break through. In the final level, as you would expect, there's some of the best weapons and items in the game. For Akane and Rhodey we can pick up a weapon that one-shots normal enemies. There's also some really useful armour, and this level's all about manipulating the points on this minecart track to take your minecart to different areas of the level. At lower levels some of the enemies might be a bit tough, but we're fine now. We've also picked up all 50 hidden pixies in the game. This lets us use the fairy bell that uses every pixie to attack the enemy. It does a nice chunk of damage at lower levels, but when you're sort of leveled up it doesn't really matter, it's kind of insignificant. These vampires here are one of the tougher enemies, however Rhodey's now got his one-hit kill weapon, so they get shredded and that's it, out of the way. On to more minecarts to the end of the level. We finally arrived at Godspeak. This is where we had our flashback or premonition at the start of the game. There's some really nice items here, but there's nothing to stop you collecting them and going all the way back out, saving and coming back. But we're ready to fight Panzer now. We can see the Holy Ark in front of us, and we can see Panzer trying to open it. We get closer and we have to face Relix yet again. Elise turns up here as well to bolster the magic of Relix, and this time we've got to take her on along with two of these vampires. We're going to bring Doyle out for this one. He hasn't had much play this playthrough, and we're also going to cast Melody's new Restore magic just to keep our health up, not that it's needed. In fact we've probably got so much health and attack power now that we can probably get through the next two fights without even healing. Relix still casts the attack magic, but there's a few new tricks. If you use any bolstering abilities on your characters, she will negate them. She will completely cancel your spells, so there's no point buffing up for this fight. This time through we've got the vampires casting the Hellblast magic. Relix will also cast Spark level 4 on you, and she's also got Shield level 2 which will resist your magic attacks. We can cast our new Inferno magic to take them down fast. It uses a load of magic points this one. We'll also cast Melody's Elemental Magic level 4 which finishes off the fight. After the fight with Relix, Panzer tries to absorb the power of the Holy Ark and we see our last CG boss intro. Along with Panzer's physical attacks, the two evil bodies can cast Blaze level 4 and Freeze level 4. So it's good to get that magic resistance up. Chaotic Blizzard is Panzer's biggest attack. This seems to be a breath attack, so you've got to get your breath defense up as well. The two evil bodies also cast Evil Feeling, but it hardly hits for anything. Panzer also has another attack. This is Scorching Hot Air, and again it's breath defense for this one. Panzer can also cast Soul Steal. This is the same spell that Forte has and it can one-shot you. I think this is based on your magic defense. Thankfully I think we are high enough for it not to be a problem. But now it's the turn of our high leveled characters. I'll cast attack magic on each of our 4 group members 4 times. We'll do 4 rounds of breath defense magic, 4 rounds of shield defense magic, and 4 rounds of support. I like that we're so overpowered here that Rhodey can basically pile drive the last boss in the game, and we can also cast the negate magic that removes any magical buffs from the enemies. From here it's just a few power attacks and we can finally beat Panzer. You can take out the 2 evil bodies first to stop them casting, but if you take Panzer down first, they both drop as well. You do get a really nice ending in this game as well. For a lot of games you get a little bit of story, play the credits and fade to black. But Shining the Holy Ark does things its own way, and I really like this. First of all, you get some backstory with the spirits that saved you at the start of the game, and you also get some dialogue with Garm and Elise. Like I said earlier, I think they feature in the Shining Force 3 trilogy. I will get round to playing that at some point. I've already played a bit of the first one, but it is a totally different game. After the fight, you return to the town of Enrich, and you speak to the king and the sage Sabato. Whatever option you choose here, you're basically still choosing to leave the town. But the thing I really like about this game is, although you've completed it, you can still walk around the town and talk to people. You can visit the church where previously you saved your game. You can't save your game anymore, but the priest will offer some different dialogue. You can visit the pub and meet up with some of your teammates. And there's this real bizarre bit of chat here where the owner asks you if you like his daughter. You say yes and she dances for you. It's really weird. I like that you can talk to each of your individual teammates here and you can talk about what their plans are next. I mean, this bit of the game really could have just been text scrolling up a screen, but they chose to take the time to make it all interactive. Outside the pub you meet up with Rhodey, the very person that you were supposed to capture for the king at the very start of the game. They even spent the time changing the dialogue of the shopkeepers here, where you previously used to get weapons and armour and that kind of thing. They no longer sell anything at this point in the game, but it's really cool that they put dialogue in, even for sort of incidental characters. You find Akane on the far side of the town and she just wants to be left alone. The very last person you speak to in the game is this guy guarding the town entrance. You have a quick bit of dialogue here, but he knows you're not coming back to the town and you leave on your own. So well done to you if you made it to the end of this video. I know it was a bit of a long one. Originally I intended just to load up one of my old saves and walk around a bit, but you can't really get a good feeling of the game just playing that, so I had to play through the entire thing again. The music in this game, as I've said before, is just absolutely incredible. It's one of my favourite soundtracks. The graphics these days might look a bit rough, but to me that's part of the charm. I'm really hoping now Sega Saturn emulation has come a long way that we'll see a proper physical re-release of this game. I'd love to have save states, something like that, maybe some extra characters and maybe even some extra dungeons. But even if they released it absolutely as is, I'd still pick it up. I don't think this game ever picked up a huge following, certainly nothing on the level of the Final Fantasy series, but I find myself going on YouTube and looking at other videos of this game that other people have made. People might have only played it the first time through, maybe when they were growing up and they had a Sega Saturn and this game. Maybe they had to sell the Sega Saturn and the game and they've just come back for a bit of nostalgia. But I know a lot of people who end up playing this game end up loving it, so hopefully you will too. Thanks for watching, take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.